Hi, and welcome to the channel Biblical Mysteries. My name is Dr. Rich Sorensen, and I'm your host for this channel. And in this video, we will be discussing the Star Gospel, which is a message to ancient people about the Messiah that was set in the stars, and therefore available to all who were willing and able to read it. And as we proceed with this topic, as with others, I'll be referring to many resources that you may want to check out for yourself. And this video is based on papers that I've written that footnote the references, so there are links to the papers in the description box. Now, there are many biblical references in the Old Testament and New Testament to stars, and the Bible uses the word star in multiple ways. It could refer to a literal star in the sky, to an angelic or a demonic being, or sometimes even to people. And so here are some examples. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens, and separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years. Lift up your eyes on high and see who has created these stars, the one who leads forth their host by number. He calls them all by name, and because of the greatness of his might and the strength of his power, not one of them is missing. Those who have insight will shine brightly like the brightness of the expanse of heaven, and those who lead the many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever." But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, the moon will not give its light, the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of heaven will be shaken. Wild waves of the sea, casting up their own shame like foam, wandering stars for whom the black darkness has been reserved forever. And his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven and threw them down to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth, he might devour her child. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to testify to you these things for the churches. I am the root and the descendant of David, the bright morning star. But regardless of how the word is used, it's clear that stars were very significant to the ancient peoples. Astronomy was the first science. And the Babylonians, Egyptians, Greeks, Romans, Hindus, and others were seemingly obsessed with the study of stars and the constellations and with their meaning. Many ancient structures, such as Stonehenge, the Sphinx, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and others, were associated with stars. The Zodiac, which we'll discuss below, was present in some form in virtually all ancient civilizations. What was the origin of this obsession? And why was astronomy the first science? The stars and planets were used as a guide to the planting and harvesting of crops, as a navigational aid, and as a means to track the passage of time. Now, we've since developed technological substitutes for all of the above, so the importance of stars has therefore been reduced to the level of curiosity. But equally significant for the ancients was the study of stars and star groupings, or constellations, in relation to divine signs and their import. Now, John Herschel, a 19th century astronomer, undoubtedly has spoken for the way that most contemporary astronomers view the constellations. Here's a quote from him. Of course, we do not here speak of those uncouth figures of men and monsters, which are usually scribbled over celestial globes and maps. Constellations have a certain convenience, but they are otherwise entirely arbitrary and correspond to no natural subdivisions or groupings of stars. Astronomers treat them lightly or altogether disregard them. Now, scholars have therefore typically rejected the constellations as meaningless, as figures concocted supposedly by the overactive imagination of the early stargazers. And in our world, the stars are largely obscured due to all the light in the night sky, so we rarely witness the heavens as the ancients did centuries ago. Now, a few of the constellations are obvious and easy to find, such as Orion and the Big Dipper, but most of them are quite hard to pick out, and others require some imagination to understand. For example, the constellation Cassiopeia, representing a queen, consists only of a crown in the shape of a W or an M, depending upon its orientation, and Canis Minor, the little dog, consisting only of the dog's tail. And having myself searched for constellations, I have also been frustrated by their obscurity, and would therefore tend to agree with Herschel's quote above. However, the important issue here is not how I, Herschel, or contemporary astronomers and scientists view the constellations, but rather how they were viewed by the ancient peoples. These figures in the stars may well be obscure and not have any scientific significance in contemporary astronomy, but they have a theological meaning, and the ancient peoples were aware of this, but that has been mostly lost to us. And science has no way of either confirming or denying such meanings. There is an amazing unity among ancient societies as diverse as Persia, Egypt, India, China, and Israel as to what the constellations were, the names that were given to the stars of which they were composed, and much more significantly, what the stars and their associated constellations meant. And when ancient astronomy and the stories and legends about the figures depicted are considered, it becomes increasingly apparent that there was a pre-existing body of celestial knowledge that was somehow known to all of these societies, and then became diversified and corrupted as it was passed on. So Herschel is generally correct. The significance of the constellations, for the most part, was not in the form or the picture they created. And human nature hasn't changed. The ancient peoples were just as intelligent as we are today. They were not stupid, and they did not have overactive imaginations, seeing, for example, a complete dog where only a tail existed. Rather, the significance of the constellations was in their names and the identity of the stars that made them up. The constellations are merely a way of locating where the important stars were in the night sky. Now, many of the names ascribed to them by the ancients are lost to us, but it is the star names, their identities, and in some cases the pictures they suggested, that was what was critical. The significance of the star names and the pictures of the associated constellations, if any, therefore lay entirely in the story that they told. And that is the message of the star gospel. Now, some of the stars were only named for the constellations they appeared in, but the brightest ones often had individual names. And at the end of the document that this video pertains to, there is a star names section that you'll need to read if you want to check this out. Now, these included, of course, the stars of the Zodiac, but many others as well, such as Regulus, which means king, from the constellation Leo, Alpha Draconis, or dragon, from the constellation Draco, Aquarii, a water carrier, from the constellation Aquarius, Sagittarii, a bowman, from the constellation Sagittarius, and Crucis, or cross, from the constellation Crux. Now, among liberal scholars, the more or less accepted view is that the stories of the Bible, such as creation, Noah's Ark, and others, are simply myths based upon older pagan tales, such as the Gilgamesh epic from Chaldea. But with the insight from the Star Gospel and other sources, it becomes clear that the pagan myths came later, and they were distortions and corruptions of a set of original accounts that date from the beginning of humanity. The Bible is thus the only source of true information about the ancient prehistorical world. After the fall of Adam and Eve, God gave a message of hope to them and their descendants. Now, we have no documentary evidence of this, but it was said that Noah carried records from Adam and Methuselah in the form of written tablets, either on the ark or buried them prior to the flood and later dug them up. Josephus claimed that Methuselah was an ancient historian of his day, who recorded the history of the world, as told by Adam, on stone tablets. And another name for Methuselah was Ubaro Tutu, and he was recorded in most extant copies of the Sumerian Kings list as being the final king of Sumer prior to the flood, and he is briefly mentioned in the Epic of Gilgamesh. His son Noah was named in the Sumerian king list as Shuruppak, or Ziusundra, and as the king who followed Ubaro Tutu. And according to the epic, Ubaro Tutu was the father of Utnapishtim, which was the Akkadian name for Noah. And Utnapishtim was the man instructed by God to build a boat in order to survive the flood. This is all in the Gilgamesh epic. One of the oldest documents of wisdom literature that was ever discovered is known as the Instructions of Shuruppak, and it was written in cuneiform. And it was possibly written either by Noah or by his father Methuselah, and was set in antiquity. It starts out, in those days, in those far remote times, in those nights, in those faraway nights, in those years, in those remote years. Now, if the story of the stone tablets is true, they were carried by Noah onto the ark, and after the ark came to rest, Noah deposited them in Arabia, or so it is said, possibly in Midian, and ultimately kept by the ancestors of Jethro, Moses' father-in-law. And if these tablets ever existed, they would have preceded by centuries the first evidence of writing, which is around 3000 BC. So it's unclear what language or script they would have been written in. But if writing was indeed developed in the pre-flood era, prior to around 3500 BC, it perished with the flood and was revived only later. Now, some of these records, or copies of them, may have been available to Moses when he wrote the beginning chapters of the book of Genesis. Furthermore, the same message was written in the stars in symbolic form. And the stars were, of course, already in place. So it was the meaning and interpretation of the stars and their names and groupings, or constellations, that was presumably supplied. Josephus credited the invention of astronomy to Adam, Seth, and Enoch. But it's not known for sure how this body of knowledge originated, who received it, and how it was passed on. However, the fact that this information was known at the time, when the ancient societies came into existence, and formed part of the collective understanding of many cultures, it is evidence for its antiquity and veracity. Then God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years." The heavens are telling the glory of God, and the firmament is declaring the work of his hands. Day to day pours forth speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words. Their voice is not heard. Yet their line has gone out throughout all the earth, and their utterances to the end of the world. In them he has placed a tent for the sun, which is as a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. It rejoices as a strong man to run his course. Its rising is from one end of the heavens in a circuit to the other end of them, and there is nothing hidden from its heat. There will be signs in the sun, moon, and the stars, and on the earth dismay among the nations. Now the demons were also associated and seemingly obsessed with stars. "How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of the dawn! You have been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, and I will make myself like the Most High. Nevertheless, you will be thrust down to Sheol, to the recesses of the pit." Now the verses above from Isaiah speak of Lucifer, son of the morning and star of the dawn, which was Satan's name before he rebelled. And some of the angels were apparently given authority over certain stars, perhaps even over galaxies or regions of the universe. Lucifer's primary dominion may have been our galaxy, the Milky Way, or perhaps even a larger area. And Satan has long been associated with serpents, dragons, and scorpions. The constellation Serpens, the serpent, and Draco, the dragon, represent him. And the curse given to Satan in Genesis 3:15, "And I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." Now the current pole star in the north is Polaris. But due to the precessional cycle, in ancient times the pole star may have been Alpha Draconis in the constellation of Draco. This star is pointed to by structures within the Great Pyramid, and it could have been part of Satan's ancient dominion, or in an area over which he wanted to rule. And the above verses from Isaiah indicate that heaven lies to the north. It says, "I will raise my throne above the stars of God, and I will sit on the mount of assembly in the recesses of the north." So some biblical scholars therefore believe that heaven, or the main abode of God, is located in the north, and therefore the region to the north may have been and or will become the main battleground between the forces of angels and demons. The mountain of the pagan storm god Baal, which is nowadays known as Jebel el-Akra, a mountain in northern Syria on the Turkey border, and that was also called Hazai by the Hittites and Cassius by the Greeks, was also located in the north. Many lightning storms occurred at this mountain, so it was thought to be the home of Baal, and that he resided in a lapis lazuli palace at the summit of the mountain. The area is also referred to as Baal Zaphon, or Baal of the North. And Baal was a symbol and an avatar and a personification of Satan. All the kings of the nations lie in glory, each in his own tomb. But you have been cast out of your tomb like a rejected branch. Like a trampled corpse, you will not be united with them in burial, because you have ruined your country and have slain your people. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels waging war with the dragon. And the dragon and his angels waged war. But they were not strong enough, and there was no longer a place found for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, the serpent of old, who was called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Woe to the earth and the sea, because the devil has come down to you, having great wrath, knowing that he only has a short time. Now, angels and demons seem to have the same basic nature, with the main difference being to whom their allegiance is given. And the book of Revelation indicates that a third of the angels joined Satan in his rebellion against God. And like Satan, some of the greater demons may have ruled over large areas of the cosmos, and then were removed from their power base by God after they rebelled against him, as indicated in the verses above. It is not said when the war in heaven took place or will take place, exactly where heaven is, how heaven is delineated, or exactly what was meant by Satan being thrown down to the earth. In other words, does earth mean the planet Earth, our solar system, our galaxy, or does it refer to some other area? But regardless of these unanswered questions, the reality of angelic and demonic beings and the state of intense conflict that exists between them is clear. Now, like men from whom power has been stripped, the demons desperately crave to regain their territory and their former power and influence, and they fight with every weapon at their disposal. The main battleground in this war is the hearts and minds of people, who are confronted with the same issue. Which side will they take? You may want to see the paper or the video, Are Angels and Demons Real?, for more information about them. Now, the Bible also indicates that the fall of Adam and Eve produced profound changes, not only in the psychology and the physiology of people, but also in the physical world. To the woman he said, I will greatly multiply your pain in childbirth. In pain you will bring forth children. Yet your desire will be for your husband, and he will rule over you. Then to Adam he said, because you have listened to the voice of your wife, and have eaten from the tree about which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat from it. Cursed is the ground because of you. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Thorns and thistles it shall grow for you, and you will eat the plants of the field. By the sweat of your face you will eat bread, until you return to the ground, because from it you were taken. For you are dust, and to dust you shall return. The Lord saw how great man's wickedness on the earth had become, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time. And the Lord was grieved that he had made man on the earth, and his heart was filled with pain. So the Lord said, I will wipe out mankind whom I have created from the face of the earth, men and animals and creatures that move along the ground, and the birds of the air, for I am grieved that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So God said to Noah, I'm going to put an end to all peoples, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth. Know this, first of all, that in the last days mockers will come with their mocking, following after their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For ever since the fathers fell asleep, Everything continues just as it has been from the beginning of creation. Now, when they maintain this, it escapes their notice that by the word of God the heavens existed long ago, and the earth was formed out of water and by water. And by those same waters the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. And by the same word the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and the destruction of ungodly men. The creation waits in eager expectation for the sons of God to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to futility, not by its own choice, but by the will of the one who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be liberated from its bondage to decay and brought into the glorious freedom of the children of God. Now, the Romans passage above indicates that all the world's peoples, as well as the planet itself, have been, quote unquote, subjected to futility by God. A futility and a frustration that all of us are intimately familiar with. But one day God will destroy this world and replace it with a new heaven and a new earth. And so the star gospel was a divine message written in the constellations of the night sky that explained God's overall plan for the ages. Now, central to God's plan for eternity is Christ, the second person of the divine Trinity, and his birth was deeply connected with the stars. The star gospel, as well as the Old Testament, which is known to the Jews as the Tanakh, had in fact long foretold his birth, ministry, death, and resurrection. And there are over 300 prophecies from the Old Testament about him that were fulfilled during his life, death, and resurrection. So here are a few of them. He would be born in Bethlehem to a virgin. He would come from the Israelite tribe of Judah. He would spend time in Egypt. He would be preceded by a forerunner. That was John the Baptist. He would be rejected by his own people. He would be called a Nazarene. He would speak in parables. He would enter Jerusalem on a donkey. He would be mocked and ridiculed. He would be betrayed for 30 pieces of silver. He would be falsely accused. He would be silent before his accusers. He would be crucified with criminals. He would be given vinegar to drink. His hands and feet would be pierced. Soldiers would gamble for his garments. His bones would not be broken. His side would be pierced. He would be buried with the rich, and he would be resurrected from the dead. Now, following the rise of ancient Babylon to power, the forces of King Nebuchadnezzar conquered Judah, the southern kingdom of Israel, in 604 BC, and then deported most of its people in 586 BC. And among the exiles was an intelligent young man named Daniel. And after successfully revealing and interpreting one of Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, he was given a high position in the Babylonian government and made chief over all the magicians, soothsayers, and wise men of Babylon. Now, among other things, these men studied the stars, both from the perspective of science, symbolism, and mysticism. And along the way, the star gospel as originally given had been perverted into astrology, which was invented and developed in Babylon. Now, similar to today, astrologers would cast horoscopes, and many believed that the stars controlled each person's destiny. Daniel, however, preserved the Tanakh, and doubtless developed his own cadre of scholar disciples who were committed to his teachings. Daniel spent his entire adult life in Babylon and then later in Persia as a high government official. And he survived the overthrow of the regime by the Medes and the Persians in 539 BC, which took place 66 years later. And by the way, that was the occasion when the then regent Belshazzar gave a huge banquet during which a hand appeared and wrote on the wall the words, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Pharsin. Daniel was called on to provide the interpretation, which was, God has numbered your days. You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting, and your kingdom has been given over to the Medes and the Persians. And that night, the Medo-Persian army took over the city. Belshazzar was assassinated, but Daniel was retained as a government minister. And when Cyrus, the emperor of Persia, entered Babylon, Daniel may have given him a copy of Isaiah chapter 45, which is written about Cyrus many years before. And this may have been a factor in the Persian kings later allowing the Jews to return to their homeland. And Daniel had several dreams that are described in chapters 8 through 12 of the book of Daniel, one of which pertained directly to the coming of Christ. 70 weeks have been decreed for your people in your holy city to finish the transgression, to make an end of sin, to make atonement for inquiry, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, to seal up vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy place. So you are to know and discern that from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. It will be built again with plaza and moat, even in times of distress. Then, after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing, and the people of the Prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary, and its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. And the 7 plus 62 are the 69 weeks of years, in other words, 483 years, quote, from the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, unquote. The decree to rebuild Jerusalem was issued by the Persian king Artaxerxes Longimanus on March 14, 445 BC. And as indicated by Sir Robert Anderson in his book, The Coming Prince, calendars at that time were based on a 360-day year. So after adjusting for that factor, the target date following the 483 period was April 6, 32 AD, which was Palm Sunday, the day that Jesus rode into Jerusalem as king and as prophesied in the book of Zechariah. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout in triumph, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and endowed with salvation, humble and mounted on a donkey, even on a colt, the foal of a donkey. Now, the above prophecy indicated that the Messiah would be cut off, and the people of the Prince who was to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And this was fulfilled in the crucifixion of Jesus and the destruction of Jerusalem, and then the temple by the armies of the Roman general Titus in 70 AD. Now, at the end of his life, Daniel was told, "But as for you, go your way to the end. Then you will enter into rest and rise again for your allotted portion at the end of the age." And Daniel died around 530 BC. But in addition to writing the book named after him, Daniel no doubt communicated the Tanakh, or the Old Testament, and the details of the Star Gospel to his inner group, which told of the birth of the King of Israel, or from Leo the lion, and from Virgo the virgin. The Bible speaks of the birth of the Messiah and echoes the Star Gospel in many places, such as the following. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not near. A star shall come forth from Jacob, and a scepter shall rise from Israel. Now, Daniel's associates were known as Magi, and many years later, their descendants and followers were the Magi described in Matthew chapter 2, who came to Jerusalem looking for, quote unquote, he is who has been born King of the Jews. And they followed celestial signs, and along with information from the Bible, they had calculated the approximate time when Christ would be born. So sometime in early 3 BC, which is the probable date, a Jewish wife in Nazareth, which is a town in northern Israel, became pregnant. And later that year, when the wife was expecting, the couple left their home, but the trip was not done for either business or pleasure. They, along with all of their countrymen, were forced by the Romans to register for a census that had been ordered by the Roman Emperor Augustus. So in order to comply, they had to return to their city or town of their ancestry. And at some point during that year, both husband and wife, who were from the tribe of Judah, therefore had to register in Bethlehem, the ancestral town of King David. Now, with so many travelers on the road, the inns and the guest houses were full. So when they reached Bethlehem, they could not find any place to stay. And the wife was about to give birth, so her husband persuaded an innkeeper to let them stay in his stable. There, it is thought, on the evening of 11 September 3 BC, on Rosh Hashanah, the first day of the Jewish New Year and the Festival of Trumpets, their son was born. Now, this seemingly mundane event in the lives of a poor and little-known Jewish family was accompanied by a series of unusual celestial occurrences. A month or so before, on August 12th, the planet Jupiter, named after the father of the gods, along with Venus, representing the goddess of fertility, had risen together in the east. Then in September, Jupiter conjoined with Regulus, the king star of the constellation Leo the Lion. The lion, being the king of beasts, is a symbol of the tribe of Judah. And these unusual conjunctions continued throughout the winter and into the following year, culminating with the joining of Jupiter, Venus, Mars, and Mercury in late summer. The planets then separated, and Jupiter continued on its way until the winter solstice, when it was located in the constellation Virgo, the Virgin, and appeared to stand still for a time. Now, during the same period, an even more unusual celestial event took place. A bright star appeared in the constellation Pisces, the fish, long considered as a symbol of Israel and later of Christianity. This brilliant star, or supernova, overpowered and dimmed all of the other stars in the same region of the sky. And as indicated above, celestial occurrences were carefully studied by many in the ancient world, especially in Persia, where the tradition of court astrologers went back centuries. And even the Romans, who were aware of biblical prophecies. The Emperor Nero was later advised by some of his astrologers to consider moving the seat of his government from Rome to Jerusalem. The Persian Empire had been conquered by Alexander the Great, and his Greek Empire had in turn been conquered by the Romans. But the Medo-Persians resurfaced as a power in Persia and Mesopotamia, and they founded a kingdom known as Partha. So they were a great concern to the Romans. Unlike the Babylonians and the Persians before them, the Parthian court maintained a school of Magi to advise them. And when the celestial events described above were observed in Persia, there was great excitement, and a group of Magi, probably under the instructions of Daniel 5 centuries before, made the long journey from the east to Jerusalem. Now, 3 individuals have been proposed based on their 3 gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But it's much more likely that a larger delegation traveled throughout the spring and the summer of 2 BC, and they arrived in Jerusalem perhaps sometime in the late fall. They immediately went to King Herod the Great, who at this point was a vile old man at the end of his life and plagued by deteriorating health. Now, Herod had been made king over Judea by the Romans for his military and organizational skills in fighting the Parthians. And now a Parthian delegation was in his capital city asking very embarrassing questions. And the Magi caused great consternation at Herod's court by asking the question, "Where is he who has been born king of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him." Herod immediately brought in the chief priests and asked them about prophecies relating to stars and kings. And to his dismay, they showed him a prophecy from the book of Numbers that we've already mentioned above. "A star shall come forth from Jacob, and a scepter shall arise from Israel. It shall crush the forehead of Moab, and tear down all the sons of Sheth, and Edom and Seir shall be a possession." And Herod was immediately concerned because he was not Jewish. He was an Edomite, an Idumean from the land of Edom, and the prophecy seemed to indicate that he and his line would be crushed. So he asked the priests where the king of the Jews was supposed to be born. And they showed him another prophecy from the book of Micah. "But as for you, Bethlehem, Ephrathah, too little to be among the clans of Judah, from out of you will go forth a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel. His goings forth are from long ago, from the days of eternity." Herod decided that he also had to find this baby so that he could kill it and remove any threat to his throne and the future of his dynasty. His position as a client king for the Romans was always precarious, and he was paranoid about threats to his power. He even had one of his wives and a number of his sons and relatives assassinated. And later, he wanted her back from the dead. Therefore, Herod told the Magi to return afterwards and let him know where the baby was, so that he could go and worship him as well. They agreed, and they went on to Bethlehem, which is only 7 miles from Jerusalem. And sometime, probably near the end of December of 2 BC, they searched the town and eventually located Joseph, Mary, and their baby son, who had been staying in Bethlehem for the past year. The Magi gave the baby the gifts that they had brought: gold representing royalty, frankincense representing worship, and myrrh representing his death. However, they were warned about Herod's motives in wanting to see the child, so they returned home without stopping in Jerusalem. And for the same reason, the parents took their baby and immediately left for Egypt. And Herod had neglected to have the Magi followed because they had agreed to come back and report to him what they had found. But after some days had passed with no report, Herod realized that he had been tricked. And in a rage, he ordered all the babies under 2 years of age in the Bethlehem area to be murdered. And this was one of Herod's last acts of cruelty. He died soon afterwards. Now, the constellations of the Star Gospel were grouped into 12 signs, known as the Mazzaroth, or Zodiac, which means circle of animals, or steps. It is the source of our calendar. And the word zodiac has come to be associated with astrology and fortune-telling, but originally it was used to denote the 12 months, or the stages of the sun's path through the sky. The zodiac is ancient and dates back to the beginning of civilization. For example, an ancient Egyptian representation of it appeared on the ceiling in the Temple of Hathor at Dendera. And the zodiac is a group of 3 quote-unquote books, each of which has 4 quote-unquote chapters to provide knowledge of God's plans for the world. And it was written in the stars, in a place where the message could be perpetually seen by all, and in a way that only God could employ. Associated with each of these 12 major signs of the zodiac are 3 additional minor ones, making a total of 48 constellations. Now, people are pretty well acquainted with the zodiac, but most people have not heard of the Star Gospel. Why is it so little known in today's world? It is because it became corrupted. The signs from the zodiac that originally denoted God's being and purpose were debased by associating them instead with divination and fortune-telling. Furthermore, this corruption occurred at a very early point in history, during the Babylonian Empire, and therefore the Star Gospel was no longer used as a primary witness. The Bible has taken its place, but the messages from the Star Gospel and the Bible are essentially the same. Furthermore, the signs used in the zodiac were very similar among widely dispersed ancient peoples, including the Babylonians, the Hindus, the Chinese, and the Egyptians. Even more amazing is the unity of thought about what the figures depicted in the constellations and what they meant. And so here are examples of the constellations and their meaning. Virgo, the Virgin. The ancient myths had common themes, one of which is that a divine son would be born to a virgin mother. And it's striking how diverse cultures emphasize the virginity of the woman. She is Athene and Parthenos, the pure virgin, to the Greeks. Bethula, the maiden in Hebrew and Syriac. Adera, the maid of virgin pureness in Arabic. And associated with Virgo is the constellation Coma, the infant, meaning the desired, the longed for, who is her son, and who will be the desire of all nations. Isis, the Egyptian goddess, was repeatedly pictured holding her infant son, who was called Sheshnu, or Horus, the desired son. And the Egyptian pharaohs traced the lineage to him. Krishna, the divine incarnation of the Hindu mythology, was also supposedly born of a virgin. Furthermore, the son of the virgin would become a prophet, priest, and king. And the zodiac begins with Virgo and ends with Leo, the lion, who leads and conquers. Libra, the scales. This is a picture of God's justice in which humanity is found wanting, but our lack is supplied through the sacrifice of Christ. Accordingly, the statement from Jesus in John 5:22, the Father has given all judgment to the Son, so that Jesus is the one who is sitting on the great white throne, from whose presence earth and heaven fled away, and no place was found for them. In Revelation chapter 20. Scorpio, the scorpion, a picture of Satan, who continually attempts to strike and sting the human race. God told Satan in the Garden of Eden, "He shall bruise you on the head, and you shall bruise him on the heel." Sagittarius, the bowman. Christ is the warrior in his return to fight the final battles of the planet. Capricorn, the goat. Once a year, the priests of Israel were told to take a male goat and send him into the wilderness to die for the sins of the people. And the term scapegoat came from this practice. The goat is a symbol of Christ in his work of atonement and redemption, but also has become associated with Satan, as the latter is to blame for much of the misery that humans have suffered. Aquarius, the water carrier. Christ is the source of living water and divine refreshment. In his words to the Samaritan woman, Jesus said, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." Pisces, the fishes. These represent the two main bodies of Christ, the nation of Israel in the Old Testament and the church in the New Testament. The symbol for the church since its earliest days was a fish. Aries, the ram. The ram pictures the sacrifice of Christ for his people. Taurus, the bull. Like Aries, the bull also pictures Christ's sacrifice. Rams were the sacrifice for the common people, and a bullock was the sacrifice for the leaders. Gemini, the twins. Adam, the first man, and Christ, the last man. This may also picture the two peoples of God, Israel and the church. Cancer, the crab. The crab is a reference to Christ's ability to hold and keep us for life and eternity. And Leo, the lion. Christ in his role of ruler and king. He is the lion of the tribe of Judah. Now, following are the details of the star gospel, the signs of the Zodiac, and the 36 other related constellations known as decans, along with their meanings. You may want to check out the document that's associated with the star gospel, because it'll show you all of this in writing, but we're going to now narrate it for you. Book 1, The First Coming of the Messiah. Chapter 1, Virgo the Virgin birth of the Messiah. Coma, the infant, the Messiah as a baby. Centaurus, the centaur, the Messiah is despised and misunderstood. Arcturus, or boots, the shepherd, which is the ministry of the Messiah. Chapter 2, Libra, the scales, the Messiah satisfying the justice of God. Crux, the cross, the instrument of the Messiah's suffering. Lupus, the victim, the slain Messiah. And Corona, the crown of thorns on the Messiah's head. Chapter 3, Scorpio, the scorpion, the Messiah's enemy. Serpens, the serpent, the one who crawls and bites on the heel. Orpheus, the serpent holder, the man grasping the serpent. And Hercules, the strong man, the mighty man victorious. In chapter 4, Sagittarius, the bowman, the Messiah's triumph. Lyra, the lyre, praise for the conquering Messiah. Hera, the altar, fire prepared for the enemies. And Draco, the dragon, the ancient symbol for Satan. Now here's book 2, the aftermath of the Messiah's first coming and their interregnum, the time between the Messiah's first and second coming. Chapter 5, Capricorn, the goat, the Messiah's atoning work. Sagitta, the arrow, God slays the Messiah. Aquila, the eagle, the smitten Messiah falls. Delphinus, the dolphin, the dead Messiah rises again. Chapter 6, Aquarius, the water carrier, the blessings of the Messiah. Pisces, Australis, the fish, the blessing bestowed. Pegasus, the white horse, spreading the blessing. Cygnus, the swan, circling the entire world. Chapter 7, Pisces, the two fish, Israel and the church. The band, the ribbon, God's people working together. Andromeda, the woman in chains. And Cephas, the ring, the deliverer coming to loosen the bonds. Chapter 8, Aries, the ram, the Messiah in the last days. Cassiopeia, the queen, the captive woman is delivered and becomes both bride and queen. Cetus, the sea monster, the Antichrist. Perseus, the armed man, the deliverer coming to the rescue. Finally, book 3, the second coming of the Messiah. Chapter 9, Taurus, the bull, the rule of the Messiah. Orion, the warrior, the Messiah as a warrior. Eridanus, the river, wrath breaking forth as a flood. Auriga, the shepherd, safety for the redeemed in the day of wrath. Chapter 10, Gemini, the twins, the old Adam and the Messiah as the new Adam. Lepus, the hare, the enemy trodden underfoot. Canis Major, the large dog. The Messiah hunts those who are opposed to him. Canis Minor, the small dog. The armies of the Messiah come along with him. Chapter 11. Cancer, the crab. The Messiah's tenaciousness in caring for his people. Ursa Major, the large bear. It's the greater sheepfold of the New Testament believers. Ursa Minor, the small bear, which is a lesser sheepfold, the Old Testament believers. Argo, the ship, the pilgrim's arrival at home. Chapter 12. Leo the lion, the prophecy of the Messiah's triumph. Hydra, the flying serpent, the serpent destroyed. Crater, the cup of wrath, wrath poured out. And Corvus, the raven, the birds of prey, devouring the enemy. Now note that the zodiac begins with the sign Virgo, the virgin who would bear a child, Jesus Christ, and ends with Leo, the lion from the tribe of Judah, who will rule, which is also Jesus Christ. And this may actually be the meaning of this ancient Sphinx in Egypt, which has the head of a woman and the body of a lion. The Star Gospel is all about Jesus Christ, as he is the central figure of the cosmos, and so God's message to Adam and Eve that their seed would bruise Satan on the head, but also be bruised on the heel. Christ descended into hell and took captivity captive, and restored access to the tree of life. Now, in considering the above list, it quickly became clear that Satan had to corrupt the zodiac because it was such a powerful witness to the coming Messiah, who would ultimately defeat and crush him. This corruption was accomplished during the first world civilization in Sumer, Akkad, or Babylon, where the Star Gospel was replaced by astrology as a means of divination and sorcery. You may want to see the paper or the video, The Origin of the Ancient Gods, to see more about that. The trashing of the Star Gospel was perhaps Satan's first and greatest triumph over God's use of nature to show us his glory and his plan for the future. And as astronomy was corrupted into astrology, the witness of the stars was tinged with evil and therefore could no longer serve as a reliable spiritual witness. Now, people today still use the stars as a means of divination and foretelling the future, but the Bible warns us from attempting to use the stars in that manner. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer. For rebellion is as the sin of divination, and insubordination is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has also rejected you from becoming king. This is the word to Saul when he was rejected from being the king of Israel. Now, considering the importance of stars in the scripture, it also reveals the implacable hatred that Satan has for Christ. Before his fall, Lucifer had been the, quote, star of the morning and the protector of earth, the brightest and most powerful of all the angels. But being the most powerful angel was not enough for Lucifer. He is jealous of Christ and wanted to be the Son of God, the ruler of the universe, and the true morning star. Therefore, he attracted a third of the angels to his side and started a war in heaven against his own father. So Lucifer was defeated and thrown down to the earth with his minions. So he became Satan, the devil, the ultimate conspirator and our relentless enemy. Satan hates us so much that he first attempts to make us do wrong and then accuses us before God day and night for doing so. Jesus Christ is the bright morning star, and all the kingdoms of the world will one day belong to Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. If you like this channel, please click on the like and share buttons. If you want to see more videos from this channel, please click on the subscribe and notify buttons. Thanks for watching.